So far, we have seen techniques for changing people who have willingly joined a group with prior knowledge of the aims of that group. But is it possible to change people who have no desire to join and who don't know the group's purpose? This is the task of the organization these three young people belong to, the Unification Church. Its members are more commonly called Moonies.
We are crossing over the crest of the hill.
I didn't like San Francisco very much. It was sort of, I felt very uncomfortable. I was very anxious to get out. I was being propositioned by pimps and hassled on the street, and I just, well, I had to get out. So I got to the bus station, and I didn't know where I wanted to go. I thought, well, maybe I'll go to Monterey. I was just sort of looking at the board to see, well, where am I going to go? And these two people came up to me. They were really friendly. It was so refreshing after, you know, what I just encountered in the street.
I was in a bus station, and I met a guy, and I'd met a lot of very interesting people on my travels. So I wasn't really, you know, too reluctant to talk to strangers.
I'm not a very open person. I just sort of spill everything just to a stranger that I would meet. But they seemed very nice, and we got into a conversation.
We just started walking. We talked for about an hour. And when my bus was due to leave, he convinced me that it would be really good for me if I went to this, you know, ski chalet in the mountains with him and his friends, because they were all interested in the same things as I was.
And we traveled on a bus at night, but the lights were on in the bus. So it was funny because I couldn't see out the window. I couldn't see where I was going.
The first step has been accomplished. Removal to an isolated shack, an environment the Moonies completely control.
I was rather tired. I'd been traveling, and I was, you know, I wanted to sleep. But the next morning, I guess it was about 8 o'clock, everyone started singing and, you know, time to get up. And, you know, it was such an exciting atmosphere. I didn't want to be the only one that stayed in bed, so I got up. And we went for hikes, and we sang songs and played games, and I got to meet various people there. And
I was just constantly busy, but it never really occurred to me because I just got really caught up in the momentum of the day. And then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I started feeling really strange. I couldn't put my finger on it. All I know was that I wanted to get away to think by myself. I was a person that I enjoy my solitude. And I hadn't had it for a while, and it was starting to bother me.
Even when I tried to go to the washroom and close the door and try to critically think about it, someone would come in and, oh, hi, you know, how are you doing? And it was very difficult to say no, get away from me, because they were so nice and loving.
I started getting almost euphoric. By the second day already, I was feeling this type of high or euphoria, like, hey, you know, I'm really fascinated about this group, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I was intrigued, almost sort of drawn in, that I had to find out what they were about.
What are they about? Why the constant group activities? The games, the sing-songs, long hikes in the country, little sleep. Like the Marines, the Moonies know that keeping their recruits busy, never giving them a minute alone, will soften them up for the eventual conversion.
The first lecture was quite general. You know, it talked about philosophy and general principles. It introduced God. So that was the first time I realized that it was somewhat of a religious group. You know, the guide didn't tell me anything about that.
I was there for, what, a day, 2 days, sitting through these lectures. Now there's more lectures, 3 a day, lasting 2.5, 3 hours, with constant activity, never being left alone. I decided that I wanted to leave. And one of the girls came up to me with this form saying, will you sign this form saying that you will stay for 7 days? And I said, well, no, I don't want to sign it. I only want to stay for a couple. She said, well, there's no bus coming anyway. Like, you can't leave for 7 days anyhow. So I went, really? You know, I was told I could leave. No, you know, and I said, well, I'm waiting for my stuff so that I can get out of here. Well, it won't come up until, you know, the 7 days are up. So, I mean, you're stuck here anyhow. Might as well sign the form.
By the end of the weekend, each lecture got a little more serious, more bizarre and more into religious principles. And by the last lecture, which was on the third day after I'd been there, I was told that Christ had returned. He was back on earth, and that all these amazing people and the reason for all this happiness and euphoria and love that I felt was because these were specially chosen people who were doing the work of God. And I was quite blown away.
A conflict between what they've been brought up to believe and this new belief sets up a battle in the minds of the recruits which can lead to total confusion.
Finally, I was alone. There wasn't anyone next to me or anything. I'd gotten a break. I was alone. I started thinking, I don't think like this. This isn't me. What am I doing? And then I thought, you know, I'd get out of here. And then another side of me would click in saying, no, Mary, no, come on now. That's just Satan talking to you now. You know you can't leave here. It's important to you. So I had this sort of a dual conversation with myself. And one side of me was almost in panic going, you know, this is almost like being brainwashed. But to me, the only thing I knew about brainwashing was, well, they lock you up in a cell and they beat you and use torture and that kind of thing. This was my understanding of what brainwashing was. I had no understanding at all.
In such confusion, it is natural to seek help from others. The only people to turn to are Moonies, and they're ready to exploit your suggestible state.
And there would be a lot of intensity on their part, saying, please, God, let her feel you and come to her, and I pray that she will have this experience. So there was all this suggestion that I should feel it, feel God, and everyone else seemed to feel God. So it was, you know, I thought, well, you know, it's got to happen sometime. And during this prayer, I just broke down and I cried for, I don't know, it was a long, long time, and everything went black, and it was just like a breakdown of everything. And I did feel something, and I interpreted it as being God.
Describe it.
The whole thing. It was a lot of pain I felt. It was complete pain, and they said, well, that's God's suffering heart. God has been suffering for humanity for so long, and He's letting you feel that. And it was such a deep, intense experience that I thought, well, this must be God. This must be what I'm feeling. So after it was all over, I felt such a sense of euphoria. And from that point on, everything was different. I was much more peaceful. I felt less confused. I felt like I was floating.
And I can remember going into a room off the lecture room and just crying and crying and crying till I just passed out on the floor. There was nowhere to sleep anyway. We always slept on the floor. I couldn't eat. I was just so much in distress. It was incredible. I'd never cried quite so hard. After I sort of finished my crying spell, another Rooney came in and comforted me and saying, well, you know, you should really stay here. And I just said, yeah, I know.
The group must be made to feel that they are always right, and anyone who disagrees with them is wrong, or better still, evil.
After I'd had this breakthrough, they finally allowed me to get away and be alone. And when I did, I felt very frightened. And a car drove by, and I felt like it was trying to run me over. I saw a black cat walk across the street. Normally, that would be quite a simple thing, but I was afraid. I felt it was Satan. They had me believing that Satan was everywhere. I felt that he was in the car. Now that I'd found God, they told me that Satan would try to do everything he could to pull me away from the group. So I got really scared, just this car and the cat, and I thought, this is it, I'm going back to safety, to where God is. So I immediately ran back to them, and they were my family from that point on.
By the fourth week, I was starting to feel some sense of almost a military type of feeling, because there was a lot of songs we would sing about how we're going to fight Satan and fight for God and all this kind of feeling. And I know that if I was given an order to take a machine gun and shoot in a 5-block radius, I would have done it without question.
Groups which have all-powerful leaders who control the environment, control all information, and eventually control the way their followers think, have one basic thing in common. They have found people who are willing to take that essential first step of surrendering to an authority figure they hope has all the answers. Throughout history, many people have taken that first step, sometimes joining a small group, sometimes a large group, and sometimes a group that engulfs an entire nation.